what's going on next? Do we have the request for today?
I think it's request next.
Request is next.
There we go.
And then after that, we're gonna play some games. Joe, do you want to come back for some games?
Sure, I'll come back with some games.
All right, cool. So we're gonna go to the SBTL. And this is a classic poll, right? I think so. Yeah.
There we go.
Well,
so I'll be back as well.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna run this one
I'll
solo.
be back.
We'll
Yeah,
see
goodbye.
We'll see you in just a minute, guys.
See you later, Jeff. Enjoy.
All right. So today, our request. This is for the SBTL Classic Poll, and for those of you who don't know, the SBTL Classic Poll is where authors request their own work and ask that I do my best to narrate a portion of their book. So today's winner is Berserker by, I am sorry, it is very difficult to pronounce this name, Dimitrios Gkirgkiris? Gkirgkiris? Can someone in the comments pronounce that in text, please? I have no idea how to say that. It's a cool last name. Gkirgkiris? Ah, jeez, I have no fucking idea. But it's a dope cover. There's a corgi. That's a corgi, right? I think that's a corgi. I don't know if there is a cuter animal in existence than a corgi, so the juxtaposition between this guy who's probably an asshole and then this corgi is it's really got me intrigued. I want to check this out. I want to check this book out. So I'm going to check it out with you guys. Let's see how this goes. There already is an audiobook and an Amazon and the Kindle available of this book, by the way. So if you check our description in this YouTube video, you will find a link to that. And yeah, if you like what I do here, go check it out yourself and see what the audiobook is. I can't remember who. Let's see. Do we have? There, let's see. The audiobook is narrated by Christian G. Gilliland. So if you guys liked the Murder Hobo series by Dakota Kraut, if you liked that narrator, he's the same guy. So here goes. Exile Amongst the Ruins. Prologue. Berserker, a LitRPG urban fantasy adventure. Apocosmos? Book 1. Apocosmos, okay. It was a cold night outside the slave barracks. Colder than it was inside the patched-up building that served as a dormitory for hundreds of working hands and gladiators. However, the rain had stopped pouring, and people of all races and genders had set up small bonfires throughout the camp. That is, those of them who had managed to survive another day in the arena. Once every 5 days, the fighting pits would claim some of them. The lucky ones. The unlucky were healed just enough to escape death and be useful to their dominus on the next fighting day. Not enough to be saved from the aching, though. Pains so terrible that they would bring them in and out of consciousness. Not enough to spare anyone from a night filled with screams of agony as their wounds festered. And certainly not enough to ignore the smell of burnt flesh under hot steel as the gashes left by the monsters they had fought were cauterized. One would have expected the dampness in the air to cleanse the foul odors. That is, if one had ever been enslaved in the ludus on the outskirts of the Nine Hells. Humidity only made the sourness of sweat more pungent. The smell of iron slowly faded as the blood of the victims of today's massacre washed away. But this strange combination of odors somehow formed a pattern of its own. Perhaps the stink of despair, the aroma of slavery. A dozen warriors argued in hushed voices around a crackling bonfire, their words unintelligible between the pained moans around them. Around them, the last raindrops slid slowly off the leaves of the thick trees surrounding the camp, tapping down onto the tin roof of their dormitories. The fire danced between the charred logs it devoured. Its flames were oblivious to the pain and suffering surrounding it, unaware of the sinister words exchanged between each of its cracklings. For the words promised only death and violence. "This is a piss-pot of an idea, Yalfrig," a lean elf said as he outstretched his hands to the fire. "And you know it. We all remember what happened last time we stood up against our Dominus." The elf was wearing black leather gloves, the fingers of the left cut down to account for his missing fingertips. His long, greasy black hair was caught in a bun, allowing his squinting black eyes to shoot daggers at a dwarf who was sitting on the other side of the fire.
"Aye,"
the stout, gray-bearded dwarf said.
"I do fucking remember Nath. They butchered us, they boiled us, and they skinned us. They took my brother."
The sound of leather rubbing against leather cut through the distant screams of pain as the dwarf clenched his gloved hand, his tattooed muscles flexing and glistening under the soft light of the fire. The doctor was never a man of many words, but this conversation could not be swept aside by a swing of the powerful greatsword hanging on his back. The muscular dwarf removed his gloves and stood up. The way the dancing light of the fire illuminated him from below made his tattooed face look even scarier. This was someone who inspired respect through fear, a trainer and a king among slaves.
"Never before have we been so many,"
said another figure, who was completely enveloped in a dark brown oversized coat. The majority of people sitting around the fire were now nodding.
"The Dominus is getting lax."
"Yeah, the fucker is giving around top-tier equipment as if it's candy,"
said a battle-scarred orc towering over everyone, even though she was sitting on the short stump of a tree. Let's try that again, right?
"Yeah, the fucker is giving around top-tier equipment as if it's candy. But we're still not enough to take them on, and we can't break out of the barrier keeping us here."
"Not yet," the dwarf continued. First, we need to reclaim our brothers and sisters and attack as one strong fist. Nobody wants to see their friends and family serve masters like fucking zombies."
"Reclaiming them is difficult enough," the elf retorted. "Doing so in secret is impossible."
"There we go again with the naysaying and the bitching,"
the orc said, but only got a flick of the elf's wrist in reply.
"The man obviously has a plan and he'll reveal it when the time's ready."
"I need you to keep the people of your squadrons tight as a dying man's jaws." Hold on, let me make sure Yalfrig is that elf. No, it's not. Hold on, who is Yalfrig again? Yalfrig's the dwarf.
"I need you to keep the people of your squadrons tight as a dying man's jaws," Yalfrig said, and threw another log on the flames. "We're constantly getting more recruits. Stronger ones, like him."
He pointed his thick index finger at a man in his mid-30s who was leaning forward while seated on a wooden stool. The human stared at the dancing flames, his piercing blue eyes unmoving. A scar ran straight from his left ear down the side of his neck, where it slipped under his leather vest. The sides of his head were shaven, but the dark blonde hair on top was tied at the back of his head. Both the white cloth covering his armor and his thick beard were stained with blood from his battle. The middle-aged berserker had a completely different disposition to the one he'd demonstrated when he frenziedly carved down and slaughtered 2 demons, one for each of his swords, in the arena only an hour ago. His face looked serene, focused even. He looked like no hell would get to him, and this place was as close to any of the hells as one could get without actually stepping foot in them.
"Who the fuck is this new guy, anyway?" asked Nelith, ever suspicious. "What's a high-level human doing here? You're a fool for trusting him, old man."
"Stand up and say that to my face, boy,"
the dwarf said, without raising the tone of his voice in the slightest.
"See how that dagger of yours will fare against me."
The elf didn't reply, but didn't move his eyes away from his doctor. Seeing how the human wasn't reacting in any way to what he was saying, he was going to have to get his answer from Yalfrig.
"I know he hasn't been planted by our Dominus, because I know exactly why he's here. He despises him as much as we do, and you all saw him fight. He hates demons more than anyone."
"What do you have to say for yourself, human?"
the orc asked.
How do we know you weren't sent here by our Dominus to spy on us? Who are you?
The man did not immediately respond, but just as the orc was becoming frustrated at his silence, he sighed and looked at her for the first time.
I am a killer,
The man said quietly, and returned his eyes onto the fire.
I've slain demons and dragons. I've killed more than my share. I've played the role of the judge and the executioner far too many times. I've made orphans and widows, decapitated the living ones with no more hesitation than I did swarms of undead.
The elf sitting next to the man now shifted in his chair uncomfortably. The man's soft voice was in stark contrast to his appearance, but not to his eyes. His eyes looked tired. Tired of the futility of everything. Tired of fighting.
I've cried in pain and retched at the sight of a person's innards. I've run in fear and lived to fight another day. I watched a woman sacrifice herself so that I could live, and turned my back to her. I've made friends, but even more enemies. The friends I betrayed. The enemies I've killed. But the enemies I made just before I was brought here are not yet dead, and I will not rest until I feel their blood on my face.
You still haven't told us why you came here,
the orc said.
Not even your name.
My name is Alexander Rage, or at least that's the name I go by. Berserker, Dragon's Bane, Battle-Forged, Traitor. I come from what some of you call the Prime Plane, or Midgard, or Die. And this is the story of how I came to this hellhole willingly.
That's it. So that's the prologue. We get a classic sort of like beginning of the quest. Everyone's in a pub talking about